Story 1. Story 1, The Whispering Corn. It started innocently enough. My grandfather, a taciturn man carved from granite and silence, had passed, leaving me his farm. Not a sprawling estate, mind you, just 40 acres of Nebraska cornfields and a weathered farmhouse that smelled of dust and old memories. I needed a change, a break from the city's relentless grind, so I took it. The first few weeks were idyllic in a lonely sort of way. The sun beat down, turning the cornstalks a vibrant, almost aggressive green. The silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant drone of tractors, was a balm to my frayed nerves. I found a strange solace in the simple routine of tending the land, a quiet satisfaction in the tangible results of my labor. Then, the whispers began. At first, I dismissed them as the wind playing tricks with the tall stalks. A sigh, a rustle, a hushed murmur lost in the vastness of the field. But they persisted, growing more distinct, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the heart of the corn, a low, sibilant chorus that prickled the hairs on the back of my neck. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I stood at the edge of the field, listening. The whispers were louder now, closer. I could almost make out words, fragmented syllables that danced on the edge of comprehension. Join us, I thought I heard, a voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Become one. A chill ran down my spine. I turned back towards the house, my heart hammering against my ribs. The silence behind me felt heavy, expectant. The next day, I tried to rationalize it. Dehydration, stress, grief. I went into town, bought groceries, chatted with the cashier at the Piggly Wiggly about the upcoming harvest. Normalcy, bless normalcy. But that night, the whispers returned, stronger than before. They no longer sounded like the wind. They sounded human. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside my window, sent my heart racing. The whispers were constant now, a low hum that permeated the very air I breathed. I began to see things in the periphery of my vision, fleeting glimpses of movement in the corn, dark shapes that vanished as quickly as they appeared. One morning, I found strange symbols carved into the wooden door of the shed. Crude, angular shapes that looked both ancient and alien. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were a warning, a message I couldn't decipher. I called my sister, Sarah. Her voice on the other end of the line was a lifeline, a tether to the world outside the farm. It's the isolation, she said, her voice laced with concern. You need to come home. Just for a few days. Clear your head. I can't, I whispered, my gaze fixed on the endless rows of corn. I can't leave. The thought of abandoning the farm, of leaving it to whatever whispered in the corn, filled me with a primal dread. It was absurd, irrational, but I couldn't escape the feeling that something terrible would happen if I left. Days blurred into nights. The whispers became a constant companion, a chorus of voices that seemed to burrow into my mind. I started talking back to them, arguing, pleading, demanding answers. My reflection in the bathroom mirror became a stranger, gaunt and haunted, eyes wide with fear. One night, I woke to the sound of scratching at my window. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The moon cast long, distorted shadows across the room. I crept to the window, my hand trembling as I reached for the curtain. Peering out, I saw nothing but the swaying corn, bathed in the pale moonlight. The whispering was louder than ever, a swirling vortex of sound that threatened to pull me under. Then, I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the field, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. It was tall and slender, its limbs unnaturally long and thin. It didn't move, just stood there, watching me. I stumbled back from the window, my breath catching in my throat. I fumbled for my phone, dialed 911. My voice was a shaky whisper. Help me, I pleaded. There's something out there. The operator asked for my location. I gave it to her, my voice cracking. As I spoke, I heard a soft tap at the front door. A slow, deliberate knock. They're here, I whispered, my eyes darting to the door. They're here. The operator's voice crackled through the phone. Are you still there? I dropped the phone, frozen in terror. The knocking continued, louder now, more insistent. I could hear the whispers all around me, closing in, suffocating me. I backed away from the door, my eyes fixed on the knob as it slowly began to turn. The whispers reached a crescendo, a deafening roar that filled my head. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for whatever lay beyond the door. The door swung open, revealing nothing. Just the empty darkness of the night and the endless rows of whispering corn. The phone lay on the floor, the operator still calling my name. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was lost in the whispers, swallowed by the vast, indifferent silence of the farm. I haven't seen Sarah since. She came looking for me, but I wasn't there. Or rather, I was, but not in a way she could recognize. The corn, it's taller now, thicker. And the whispers, they are still there. Waiting. Story 2. Story 2, The Blight. My grandfather, Elias, a man weathered like the barnwood he loved, left me his farm in rural Nebraska. I'd spent summers there as a kid, chasing fireflies in the tall grass and helping him mend fences. It was a place of sun-drenched days and star-strewn nights, etched in my memory with a nostalgic glow. After his passing, I felt compelled to return, to reconnect with a simpler time. I was naive. The farm was bigger than I remembered, the field stretching into the endless flatness of the plains. The house, a 2-story clapboard affair, sat nestled amongst a grove of oaks, their branches gnarled and twisted by decades of prairie winds. The first few days were peaceful. I spent my time clearing out the cobwebs and familiarizing myself with the layout, the creaks of the floorboards and the size of the old house becoming a comforting soundtrack. It started subtly, a low hum in the air, almost imperceptible, like the distant drone of a tractor. Then came the smell. Acrid, metallic, like blood and burnt earth. I dismissed it as a trick of the wind, carrying the stench from a nearby slaughterhouse. But the smell persisted, growing stronger, clinging to the air like a shroud. One evening, while mending a section of barbed wire fence bordering the cornfield, I noticed something moving in the stalks. Something large. The corn swayed rhythmically, as if a giant hand was sweeping through it. I called out, my voice thin and reedy in the vastness. There was no answer. Just the rustling of the corn, growing louder, closer. I felt a prickle of unease crawl up my spine. Hello? I called again, louder this time. Silence. Then, a guttural, rasping sound echoed from within the cornfield. It wasn't human. It was low, vibrating, like rocks grinding together. My heart pounded against my ribs. I dropped the fence wire and backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the moving stalks. Whatever was in there was big, and it was coming closer. I ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the house, slamming the heavy oak door shut behind me and bolting it. I leaned against the cool wood, gasping for breath, my ears straining for any sound from outside. Silence. Just the frantic thumping of my own heart. The next morning, I cautiously ventured outside. The cornfield seemed normal, the stalks swaying gently in the breeze. But the smell was still there, stronger than ever. And now, there were tracks. Deep, cloven hoofprints, larger than any animal I'd ever seen, leading from the field towards the house. They stopped abruptly at the edge of the porch. Over the next few days, the incidents escalated. Strange symbols, etched into the barn door with something sharp, appeared overnight. My tools vanished from the shed. The humming in the air became a constant, oppressive presence. I felt watched, every movement scrutinized by unseen eyes. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves, sent jolts of fear through me. I tried calling the sheriff, but the phone line was dead. My cell phone had no signal. I was completely isolated. One night, the rasping sound returned, closer than ever. It seemed to be coming from right outside the house. I grabbed a rusty hunting rifle from the closet, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Peering through a crack in the boarded-up window, I saw it. It was enormous, a hulking mass of muscle and sinew, silhouetted against the moonlight. Its skin was a sickly, mottled green, and its head was adorned with a pair of massive, curved horns. It moved with an unnatural grace, its hooves barely disturbing the dew-laden grass. It stopped beneath my window, its head tilted upwards, as if it could sense my presence. Then it let out a deafening roar, a sound that vibrated through the very foundations of the house. The glass in the window cracked. I fired the rifle. The shot echoed across the empty fields, but the creature barely flinched. It turned its head towards me, and I saw its eyes. They were glowing red embers, burning with an ancient, malevolent intelligence. It took a step closer, its massive form casting a long, ominous shadow over the house. I scrambled back, dropping the rifle, my mind screaming in terror. I fumbled for the back door, desperate to escape. As I burst out into the night, I saw the barn, engulfed in flames, the symbols on its door glowing like fiery runes. The creature was gone. I ran. I kept running, across the fields, through the darkness, the smell of burning wood and that acrid, metallic stench filling my lungs. I didn't look back. I don't know what it was, or what it wanted. But I know one thing, whatever lurks in the cornfields of my grandfather's farm is something far older, far more terrible, than anything I could have ever imagined. And I know, with a chilling certainty, that it's still out there, waiting. Story 3. Story 3, The Blight. The air, thick with the sweet rot of fallen apples, clung to me like a shroud. Grandpa Joe's orchard had always been my sanctuary, a place of rustling leaves and sun-dappled grass. Now, it felt wrong. The familiar scent of decay was overpowering, cloying, laced with something faintly metallic that made my stomach churn. "Grandpa?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the heavy stillness. It was harvest time, usually a flurry of activity, but today, an unnatural quiet had descended. The only sound was the buzzing of flies, a thick, droning chorus that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. I found him by the old well, a gnarled figure hunched over a pile of apples. "Grandpa Joe?" I repeated, approaching cautiously. He didn't respond. His back was to me, his shoulders shaking slightly. "Grandpa, are you okay?" I touched his arm, a tremor running up my own. His skin was cold, clammy, like damp earth. He turned slowly, and I recoiled. His eyes, normally a twinkling blue, were glazed over, milky white. A thin, black fluid oozed from the corners, tracing lines down his weathered cheeks. He didn't speak, just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Then a low growl rumbled from deep within his chest, a sound that had nothing human about it. He lurched forward, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. His fingers, thick and calloused, dug into my flesh, leaving deep, purple welts. I screamed, wrenching myself free and stumbling back. His grip loosened, and he collapsed onto the ground, the guttural growls continuing, morphing into a wet, choking cough. Black ichor bubbled from his lips, staining the earth around him. Terror seized me. I ran, blindly, through the orchard, the sweet, sickening smell of rot pursuing me like a predator. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I reached the farmhouse, slamming the door behind me, bolting it shut. Inside, the air was heavy, stagnant. The curtains were drawn, casting the rooms in an oppressive gloom. Grandma Rose was sitting at the kitchen table, her head bowed. "Grandma," I gasped, my voice trembling. "Grandpa, his?" She looked up, her eyes the same milky white as Grandpa Joe's. The same black fluid seeped from the corners. A slow, sickening smile spread across her face, revealing teeth that were too long, too sharp. "His changing," she whispered, her voice a raspy, guttural croak. The world tilted. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. Something was terribly wrong. This wasn't my grandma. This wasn't my home. I stumbled into the living room, desperate to escape the suffocating horror that had permeated the farmhouse. The television was on, the screen flickering with static. A low, rhythmic thumping pulsed from the walls, growing louder, faster, in sync with the frantic beat of my own heart. I glanced out the window, back towards the orchard. The trees were swaying gently, their branches laden with swollen, pulsating fruit. The apples, once a vibrant red, were now a deep, purplish black, glistening with the same viscous fluid that oozed from my grandparents' eyes. The thumping intensified, the walls seeming to breathe, to pulse with some unseen life. I pressed my ear against the plaster, trying to decipher the source of the sound. It seemed to be coming from within the walls themselves, as if something were trying to break through. A scratching sound started, low at first, then growing louder, more insistent. It came from the attic above. I looked up, my breath catching in my throat. The ceiling bulged slightly, the plaster cracking, revealing glimpses of something dark and writhing beneath. Fear gave way to a primal instinct for survival. I had to get out. I ran to the back door, fumbling with the lock. It wouldn't budge. I threw my weight against the door, but it held firm. The scratching above grew frantic, desperate. The thumping, the scratching, the sweet, sickening smell, it was all too much. I sank to the floor, my head in my hands, the world spinning around me. Then, silence. The thumping stopped. The scratching ceased. The only sound was the buzzing of flies, a constant, droning reminder of the horror that had engulfed my grandparents, my home. Slowly, I raised my head. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. I crawled to the window, peering out into the orchard. The trees were still, their branches heavy with the black, pulsating fruit. A figure emerged from the shadows of the barn. It was Grandpa Joe, but different. Taller, thinner, his limbs elongated and grotesquely contorted. His skin was stretched taut across his bones, revealing the pulsing, black veins beneath. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, his milky white eyes fixed on the farmhouse. He raised a hand, beckoning me. His fingers were long, thin, tipped with sharp, black claws. A low growl rumbled from his chest, echoing the sound I had heard earlier, but deeper, more guttural, more animalistic. Behind him, other figures emerged from the barn, from the orchard, from the shadows of the trees. Grandma rose, her face contorted in a grotesque parody of a smile. Other figures I didn't recognize, their bodies twisted and deformed, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They were all beckoning me. Calling me. The back door creaked open. A wave of the sweet, rotting smell washed over me. I don't know what happened next. I don't remember leaving the farmhouse. I don't remember anything after that, except the smell. The sweet, sickening smell of rot, forever etched in my memory. It's always there, lurking just beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the day the blight took my grandparents, my home, and perhaps, me. Sometimes, I wake up in the night, covered in a cold sweat, the smell filling my nostrils. I look out my window, at the trees in my own backyard, and I wonder, are they changing too? Are they waiting? Beckoning? I don't know. But I can smell it. I can always smell it. The sweet, sickening smell of rot.